Good morning. Learning Tractate Shabbos. Moitzi Yain is the name of the chapter. We're holding in Perek Shmini, the 8th chapter, and Amud Pei, page 80. The Gemara cites a Vaisa that amplifies the Mishnah's ruling. Tana Shtesis B'dyei. One is liable for taking out 2 letters worth of dried ink, Shtesis B'kolmus, or 2 letters worth of ink in a quill, Shtesis B'kalmorin, 2 letters worth of ink in an inkwell. So it says in number 1 in the note that Vaisa teaches that the minimum amount of ink is constant. What is right? It remains 2 letters worth, no matter what the location of the ink is. We do not say that the ink is already in the inkwell, or the pen is more significant and does not require a minimum of 2 letters worth. Ritva Mahak states that the amount of ink in the quill or inkwell must be sufficient so the 2 letters can be written. This includes a small amount of ink that will stick to the sides of the pen or inkwell. So, if one takes out 1 letter's worth of dried ink, and 1 letter's worth of inkwell in a quill, and 1 letter's worth of ink in an inkwell. Now, what is the law? Do the inks that are in different places combine to comprise a minimum measurement, rendering him liable or not? The Gemara ends with Teiku, let the question stand. If one took out 2 letters worth of ink and he wrote the 2 letters in the public domain, while he was walking, Chayav, he is liable for the transfer. So their writing is their placement in the public domain. So that's the hanacha, that's the placing it in public domain. And Rava said, if one took out 1 letter worth of ink and wrote it, thereby completing its transfer, and then he repeated the process again, took out another 1 letter's worth of ink and wrote it, thereby completing its transfer. Patu is exempt. My time, why is he exempt? Is Patu because for at the time that he took out the last letter, the measure of the first letter is already lacking. As ink decreases in volume when it dries, thus the 2 half measures do not combine to form a full measure. If he took out foodstuffs in the amount of half of a dried fig's volume and placed them down, and then he did it again, and he took another half dried figs outside, the first half measure is deemed as if it had been caught by a dog and swallowed, non-existing, or it was burnt to Fatu. Even though it didn't happen, it's considered as if it happened, and is Patu for taking out the half measure of dried fig. Why he's still laying it there? Why is he Patu? The 2 acts should combine to render him liable. If he came first and picked up the first half measure, before he's setting down the second one, for the first half measure is deemed as if it had been caught by a dog or burnt up before it ever was set down, and he is therefore exempt. Rava also said, if one took out foodstuffs in the amount of half a dried figs, 88 and then went back and took out a second half-dried fig's volume and passed it over the first portion, chayav is liable, even though he did not actually set the second portion down. He passed it over the first portion. But he did not rest. Why is he liable? So the Gemara says, Rava speaks of an instance where he passed the second portion within 3 tvachim of the first portion. So Rava teaches that the second part is deemed to have been set down, and the transfer is liable. Within 3 tvachim on the ground, according to the rabbis, within 3 tvachim of the ground requires a placement on a place of at least a minute size, according to the rabbis, in order to be considered at rest. We see that the Rava does not subscribe to the view that passing an object within 3 tvachim of a place of rest is a kind to actually setting it down. Here, where Rava requires at least minimal placement, we speak of one who throws the object from one domain to another. Here, where Rava rules that even passing the object within 3 tvachim is sufficient, we speak of one who carries the object from one domain to another. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis told the Baisa, he want to count the equivalent of half a dried fig, and he did it again with another half dried fig. If it was one period of awareness, he's liable. He has to bring korban chatos for transferring. If he did it in 2 periods of awarenesses, he is exempt. If it was one awareness to one reshus, to one domain, he is liable. But if it was one awareness but to 2 different domains, he is exempt. But this only applies when there exists between the 2 public domains an area that can create a chatos liability. But if the public domains are separated only by karmelis, which is it's non-considered, it's a domain that is not public and not private, they are not considered separate. Even karmelis, the 2 domains are considered separate. But if they are separated only by a block of wood, they are not considered separate. Rava said, even if they are separated by only a block of wood, they are considered separate in Rabbi Yossi's view. Rava is consistent with his opinion. The Amar Rava, he said elsewhere, Reshus Shabbos Reshus Gitin Dam, the domain in regard to the Shabbos, like the domain in regard to the divorce law, throwing the get in the
woman's Reshus yard.
Yeah. He throws it in the perimeter where the woman is standing, or the yard. If one takes out eye paint, enough to paint one eye, enough for one eye, but women do not paint only one eye. Why then is the amount considered significant? Because exceedingly modest women who veil their faces and leave only one eye uncovered will only paint one eye. If one takes eye paint, the minimum amount that is that he must take out, the minimum amount that he must take out to be liable varies according to his purpose. If he takes it for medicinal purposes, for healing purposes, enough to paint one eye is liable, because that does the trick, it does the job. If one is doing it for adornment, is only liable for 2 eyes, because most of the time people are not going to just do one eye. The Baisa's ruling, which establishes the minimum for cosmetic eye paint is 2 eyes worth, is at odds with Rav Huna, who states that 1 eye's worth is sufficient to make him liable. So Hillel, the son of Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, explained it as follows: Kitanyahu, when this Brisa was taught Bironius, it was taught with respect to village women. And I guess village women would be, did not usually veil their faces, small populations and quieter lifestyle prevalent in those locations made for a less frivolous way of life, and the safeguard of excessive modesty was not required. It was common for women who lived there to paint both eyes together, and 2 eyes worth of eye paint is therefore the minimum measure. Cotton, if he takes out wax enough to place on the opening of a small hole, enough wax to place on the opening of the small hole of a wine barrel, glue enough to place on the head of a board, enough glue to place on the head of the board. That is at the head of the reed of bird trappers. Pitch or sulfur enough to form a hole. Cotton enough to form a small hole in a vial containing mercury. Crushed brick enough to make an opening for the crucible. Of gold refiners, Rabbi Yehuda says enough to make a tripod. Does the Mishnah mean to say that the measurement of Rabbi Yehuda is larger? We have established as a general rule that whenever Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis dispute a measurement, the measurement of the rabbis was always larger. Rabbi Yehuda was smaller, the rabbis were larger. That we learned in Mishnah above concerning rope and reed grass. Enough to take the measure of a small child's shoe with it, which is a smaller measurement than that advanced by the rabbis. Enough to make a hanging loop for a stiffer or for a sifter or a sieve. Say that Rabbi Yehuda only requires enough crushed brick to plaster the cracks in the tripod of a small stove, and this is smaller than the measure of the rabbis. The Mishnah stated, "Subin kedelitin al pikush utzerfezov bran," enough to place on the opening of the crucible of gold refiners. Tanu rabon lomoitzi se'ar. If one carries out hair, is liable only if he takes out enough to knead clay with it. Tit. If he is liable, if he takes out clay, he is liable if he takes out enough to make an opening in the crucible of gold refineries. Sid kedelosud lime, enough to smear a little of girls. Tana kedelosud etzba ktana shalbonus, enough to smear upon the little finger of girls. The Gemara discusses the practice of smearing with lime as a depilatory. Jewish daughters who reached their time, who began to show physical signs of maturity, but did not reach the age in years when such signs are commonplace, would take these steps to remove unwanted hair. So I guess waxing. The daughters of poor people would smear the unwanted hair with lime. The daughters of rich would smear them with fine flour. And the daughters of kings would smear them with oil of moir. As the pasuk says, 6 months with oil of moir. What is oil of moir? This is perfumed oil infused with spices. Oil of moyer is oil of olives that have not attained 1/3 of their normal growth. Tiny Abu Damir and Piknoin Shemens and Piknoin Shemen Zaysh Lev Yeshlish. And Piknoin is oil of olives that have not attained 1/3 their normal growth. So why do people anoint themselves with it? Because it removes the hair and causes the skin to glow. Rav Bivi Havile Rav Bivi had a daughter, Tafla Aver. He smeared her with lime, limb by limb, one limb at a time, and the lime caused her skin to become radiant. Her appeal as a prospective mate was thus greatly enhanced. Shokal Ba'arboma Zuze, he was able to take 400 Jews for her, I guess for her dowry. There was a certain Gentile in his neighborhood, who also had a daughter. Having seen Rav Bivi's success, he attempted to duplicate the treatment. However, he smeared her entire body with lime at once, and she died. Amar Kota Rav Bivi, and he said, Rav Bivi killed my daughter. Amar Rav Nachman said, when he heard of this incident, Rav Bivi, the Shosi Shich Rav Bivi, who drinks beer in his household, Ba'ayon Bnosi Tiflo, his daughters require smearing with lime. Anan de lo shasinon shicha, but we who do not drink beer in our household, lo ba'ayon bnosim tiflo, our daughters do not require smearing with lime. I guess the drinking of beer causes body hair to darken and increase in quantity. So Rav Nachman commented that in general the procedure of smearing with lime was not usual for Jewish girls. It was only the unusual consumption of beer in Rav Bivi's household that necessitated it at all. Rav Yehuda says enough to smear a kilkul. Rav Nehemiah says enough to smear an andipi. Andipi. So the Gemara asks, what does it mean? My kilkul, my andipi. What are they? Amarav tzido uvas tzido. The temple and the area under the temple. Lime was used to smooth down the hair on the temples and to remove the short hairs from the area below it. So the Gemara notes that the amount of lime needed to smooth down the hair on the temples is larger than the amount needed to remove the hair from the area beneath the temples. Accordingly, the Gemara asks the member of the Shulad Buddha Nofish, then wish to say that the measurement of Buddha is greater than that of Rabbi Nehemiah. But we have established when there is a dispute concerning the minimum measures for carrying out on Shabbos, the measurement of the rabbis is generally larger. For Rabbi Yehuda usually maintains a stringent position in these matters. The measurement of Rabbi Yehuda is indeed smaller than that of the rabbis, requires enough to smear a small limb. Rabbi Yehuda indeed holds a stringent position. However, it is larger than the minimum required by Rabbi Nehemiah, who holds an even more stringent position. They challenge these definitions from the following Baisa. Omar Rabbi. The words of Rabbi Yehuda appear correct with respect to dissolved lime, while the words of Rabbi Nehemiah appear correct with respect to an egg-shaped lump of lime. From this Baisa, it is obvious that two different types of lime were usually used for kilkul and andipi. And if you think to say that kilkul and andipi refers to the temple and the area under the temple, both this and this are performed with dissolved lime. It can be proven from the Baita that at least one of these definitions is incorrect. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Elo Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Devei Rabbi Ami, they send the academy of Rabbi Ami, Andipo, Rabbi Nehemiah requires enough lime to seal the opening of a barrel with two spigots. But does a person, cannot challenge this interpretation, but does a person make his money forfeit by sealing the opening of his barrels with lime? Elam Rav Kana Shinosois and Dipi are incremental markings that were baked onto the sides of measuring utensils. There were incremental markings in the hin measure that was used in the temple to measure out the wine for the libations and that accompanied certain sacrifices. Ad kan lefar, till here for a bull. Ad kan le'ayl, until here for a ram. Ad kan lecheves, and until here for a sheep. Or if you prefer, you can say Maya andipo, apuso. What is andipo? Is lime which is applied to the forehead. There was this person of the Galilee who came to Babylonia. They told him, expound to us concerning Ma'aseh Merkava, which is referring to workings of the chariot. Is a term, esoteric passages in Yechezkel. It sees the Merkava. So I will expound to you. Rabbi Nechemia expound to his colleagues. He was about to begin his discourse. When a hornet emerged from a hole in a nearby wall, and it stung him in the forehead. And he died. And they said concerning him, min delay dole. From his own head, this came upon him. He brought his death upon himself by daring to expound on such matters publicly. In their recounting of this incident, the word andipi is used to mean forehead. This supports the Gemara's final interpretation. New Mishnah. The Mishnah continues to list minimum measures of various substances with respect to carrying them out on Shabbos. Adoma, one takes earth, kechoisam otzufin, enough to seal of cargo sacks. Diva be'akiva v'chachom emrim. The sages said, enough for the seal of letters. Fertilizer or fine sand. Enough to fertilize a single stalk of cabbage. These are the words of Akiva. The sages say, enough to fertilize a leek. If one takes out coarse sand, enough to put on a full trowel of lime. A reed, enough to make a pen. And if it was thick or cracked and thus unsuitable as a pen, he is liable if he takes out enough to cook the most easily cooked of eggs. When it has already been beaten and placed in a pot, in a skillet. The Gemara says, one is liable if he takes out enough coarse sand to put on a full trowel of lime. Enough to place on the opening of a plaster's trowel the amount that is contained in a trowel full of plaster. From this ruling of the Mishnah, we see that sand was added to lime. The Gemara therefore asks, who is the Tana who says that sand is beneficial to lime when it is mixed into it? It was the view of Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya. One may not plaster the walls of his house with lime in the post-temple era, unless he mixed straw or sand into the plaster. If he mixes in straw, it is permitted. Choil also, but if he mixed it with sand, it is forbidden. Because this is strong plaster. The Brisa states that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the addition of sand is beneficial to lime. Our Mishnah accords with his view. Rav Amar afilu tema rabon. You can even say that the Mishnah accords with the view of the rabbis. So since they permit the adding of sand to lime with respect to building in the post-temple era, it emerges that kilkula is a tikkuno. Its reunion, its ruination, actually its destruction, is its remedy. The fact that the sand impairs the appearance of the lime is considered an improvement to the lime, for it allows the lime to be used. According to the amount of sand that is added to lime is considered a significant amount. Kona kedelasis kulmus, a reed enough to make a pen. Tano kulmus amagela kishos boiso, a pen that reaches to the joints of the writer's fingers. Boy Ravashi, related inquiry. Kesher olin and kesher atachton, must the pen reach the upper joint, the joint that connects the finger to the hand, or the lower joint? Take the Gemara has no resolution and concludes that the question stand. V'imay ove, and if it was thick, tono, meaning if or cracked enough to cook the most easily cooked of eggs, beaten or placed in a pot, the Gemara cites a brisa that explained the final ruling. Tono turufa b'shemen Suno beilpas, the Mishnah refers to an egg that was beaten, mixed with oil, and placed in a pot. Beating the egg allows it to cook faster. Amar lei, the Gemara attempts to identify most easily cooked of eggs, referred to the Mishnah. Amar lei ma breder ravina levrei. Mishomelach beitzo kalo maihi. Have you heard an explanation, any explanation of what kind of egg an easily cooked egg is? I have heard that it is the egg of a small stove. So Mar asked his son, my time, what is the reason that this egg cooks easily? So he answered, Mishum the Zutra. His son replied, because it is very small and cooks more quickly. So Ravina persisted, Eima the Tzipoto. Say instead that it refers to the egg of a hummingbird, which is an even smaller egg. Ishtikse was silent, conceding that he could not defend his definition. Because he said, what is beitz okalo? What is an easily cooked egg? He responded, a small dove. So he said, what about hummingbird? So Ishtik, Amar lei midish mielach beha. Have you heard anything about this? Amar lei Achi Amar Rav Sheshes. Mar replied to him, this is what Rav Sheshes said. Beitzas tarnegoilos, the most easily cooked of eggs is the egg of a hen. Why is it called an easily cooked egg? The sages measured and determined. There is no egg that is easier to cook than the egg of a hen. But what is unique about this law, that all the measures of food with respect to the Shabbos are the equivalent of a dried fig? But here, the measure is the equivalent of a full egg. He is liable if he takes out enough reed to cook the equivalent of dried figs volume of an easily cooked egg. In the Mishnah does not mean that there must be enough reed to fuel the fire that cooks an entire egg. It is enough if it can fuel the fire that cooks a portion of an egg that is equivalent to the volume of a dried fig. We shall continue, God willing, tomorrow.